So as we've been saying, this is a somewhat new learning model. Um, it's not a model where the trainer gives the information to the student. It's a model where the student actually has to work hard to discover the information. And as I said before, when we work hard, particularly if we start getting into error, and particularly if the error tends to repeat, in other words, we keep messing it up, we keep not having success, there are a number of things that can happen that you should really be aware of. Possibilities of reactions from your students as they get into error. It's it's almost universal in the people that I've seen that when they get into error, they get into a state of some discomfort. We're not comfortable making mistakes. We're not comfortable in that state of error. And as soon as that discomfort arises, is in almost every other human milieu, when discomfort arises, we want to get rid of the discomfort. We want to discharge it. We want to put it away. We want to correct the error so we can't feel that discomfort anymore. I've seen it many times. And what I observe is that when that discomfort in the student arises, it generally gets focused in one of several places. And if you watch your students, you'll see these patterns emerging. A very typical pattern when a person starts getting into some difficult learning, a place where they're having error, is that they will begin to they'll begin to sort of blame themselves, and they'll start to get self-critical or self-judgmental. They're not going to sit there and say, "Oh, I'm so stupid," or "Oh, I can't do this." That's very rare. But what you will see is that their tension begins to mount, and they begin to look quite distressed and quite uncomfortable. Oftentimes, you'll see that they'll be distracted. They'll be trying different things. They look nervous and uncomfortable. In general, that reaction is suggesting that they think I've done something wrong, and I don't like doing something wrong, and I don't want to appear to be stupid. I need to correct this. So they get all wound up. If you get a student that begins to blame themselves, you really need to kind of up your level of support. Make an intervention with a student. Say, you know what, look, it's a game. And in fact, the more you make mistakes, the more you're going to learn. So you're probably learning more than anyone else in the room. So we can make interventions like that. I will sometimes go over and just sit with a student and give them some very specific help. I'll increase the level of scaffolding and say, look, let's just slow down, have a look at this, and see if we can figure it out. So you need to support, you need to be kind, you need to kind of offer yourself a bit to that student so they can relax into the learning. Highly charged levels of anxiety are not the best learning place. Some level of anxiety is excellent, but if it gets too high, they're just going to keep making mistake after mistake. So watch for that behavior. Another behavior when people get into error and difficulties, they'll begin to look for somewhere else to blame. And one of the obvious targets for blame would be you, the instructor. And they'll say, well, you never told us this. Or, and you'll hear in their voice, you'll sense in their voice that they're not happy. There's something wrong. Well, what's happening in that case is, well, instead of blaming themselves, they're blaming you. And you need to kind of get comfortable with this. It happens from time to time. Why didn't you say, or you never explained properly, or something like that. You might even make, as an instructor, you might make an error. And boy, at that point, they'll say, wait a minute, you really messed up my quarter, or you really did something. And you need to be able to take that with a great deal of equanimity. Just let it roll off your back and just let it be. They're discharging. But more likely than that, if the student is one of these people who wants to put the blame somewhere else, you'll see again and again, students will put the blame on the software or on the computer. I just ran a game recently, and I can't tell you the number of times that people would call me for assistance, and they would say, there's something wrong, the order hasn't come in, or I can't release I can't release this production. There's some problem here. And clearly, what's happened is they failed to do something. But instead of taking an attitude of inquiry and interest, they immediately have assumed that there's something wrong with the software, there's something wrong with the simulation. Now, look, we have to be honest. Sometimes there are software errors or simulation errors. They're quite rare, but that sometimes happens. But in most cases, it's human error. And we need to then go back, and this poses actually an interesting challenge for the trainer. Our instinct often is to go and correct it and say, well, look, let me have a look at your purchase orders, or let me have a look at your production. Let me see if I can figure out this problem. I would suggest in all but the rarest of cases, you want to avoid that. And you want to try to shift. What you want to try to do in that case is you want to try to shift that question, that blaming of the software, back to a question. And you might say, that's really interesting. You can't release any production. That's obviously that's really bad. I wonder why that might have happened. Let's speculate. What are the things that could have happened? I said, I don't know. I've done everything right, and you'll hear that again and again. He said, well, look, assuming you did do everything right, what would we be able to see right now? So you take them back through their logic. They say, well, I should be able to see purchase orders and when they should arrive. Well, let's go look at that. So you basically say, well, there's no purchase orders, so there's no stocks. But I did it right. And you're basically, they're still blaming the software, right? So you then basically say, look, let's not worry about blaming. Let's not worry about if you did it right or if you did it wrong. Since we don't have any stocks and since we don't have any purchase orders, why don't we go back and run MRP again? Or why don't we go back and look at your forecast and do it one more time? And this time, I might even stand over your shoulder to watch to make sure. And 99 times out of 100, they had made an error. They forgot to do something. But that kind of stroppiness could easily put you off, and you could come back with a similar affect, which isn't helpful. Or it could put you in a position of wanting to solve their problem, which also isn't helpful. What you're really attempting to do is to push the responsibility for the learning back onto them. You're not blaming them for the mistake. You're reframing the mistake into a learning opportunity. Well, let's go through it one more time to see how that error might have happened. So reviewing that, three areas that you need to watch for when people get into error. One is people who really get down on themselves, blame themselves, and get quite anxious and nervous. People who will come back at you with some kind of aggressiveness, and generally very mild, but you might not like it, so be prepared for it. And third, people basically assuming that they did the right thing, but the software has somehow or other failed them. So those three things are good to watch for and to be prepared for, so you can react in the most positive way for the student learning. And again, with the objective, we are attempting to make them independent as possible, as quickly as possible.